We're going to go ahead and get started. Okay, so we are using GoToWebinar technology here. So what that means is you will be muted during this webinar. However, we do encourage questions or comments. So if you'd like to, throughout the presentation, write your questions in the comment box here, in the question box, you can go ahead and do so. And at the end, we're going to have time to answer your questions. So please do go ahead and submit those throughout the session. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So hi, I'm Erin Hutchins. I'm one of the co-founders of ACT Leadership. I'm an executive coach. I have been doing executive coaching and team coaching and training hundreds of individuals, leaders, and managers and HR professionals to become certified coaches. Joining us today is Glenn St. Ange. Hi, Glenn.
Hi there.
And Glenn is really a special guest. Glenn is an HR professional. He's also an executive coach. He's becoming pretty well known in the coaching industry now. He helped his organization really transform their culture. They were also awarded the 2017 ICF Prism Award for transforming culture and applying coaching skills. So it's a real treat to have Glenn you on the call joining us today. I just want to hand it over to you for a second to do a quick introduction on yourself.
Thanks, Erin. I'm super excited to be here. My life purpose is to inspire self and others to realize dreams, and I'm so excited about coaching and the impact that it can have on individuals, on teams, on organizations, and on the world. That I'm really pumped to tell a little bit about our story. Just a bit about me. I've spent my entire career working in human resources, worked in a number of different environments, public sector, retail, biotechnology. In the past 10 years, I worked for a science and engineering company called the AFCC. I live in Vancouver, love to ride my bike, love hiking, and I love coffee.
No, it's early your time right now.
Right?
Yeah, great. Well, thanks, Glenn. Well, a little bit about what we're going to be doing on this webinar is I'm going to just give you a quick overview of why leadership and performance coaching. So why is coaching so hot right now? Then we're going to go in and talk about, we're going to hear from Glenn, and he's going to tell his story around, his story, what inspired him to become a coach, how he was able to apply the coaching skills within his organization. So we're going to do a little like an interview session with Glenn, so he can talk about his experience. And then I'm going to share with you an overview of our leadership and performance coaching program. And currently, right now, our company, ACT Leadership, is collaborating with Brown University to offer leadership and performance coaching, a coaching certification program. So we'll talk a little bit more about the program then. And then at the end of the session today, we're going to have a Q&A. So as a reminder, please do write your questions in the comment box as they come up, and we'll get to them at the end. Okay, so let's just talk a little bit about the why, because the why is so important. Just like why is coaching so hot right now? Why is it such a hot topic? And one of the things that we're, after having done a lot of coach training, we hear, we have a lot of leaders, HR professionals like yourself coming into our program that are talking about how the things in organizations are becoming so complex. So there's a constant increase for, demand for results, hit your numbers. There's a lot of information overload. You think about how much information we have incoming at us at the moment. Businesses are becoming more complex. There's people working from home now. Also millennials, one of the things that we know is, millennials don't like to be told what to do. So we really have to flex our style and working with that population. And then there's the customer side. What we're going to really do today is hone in on this 70%. So Gallup consistently reports that 70% of the U.S. workers are not engaged. That's a huge number. And so we're really going to hone in on that number today. And Glenn, I'm curious what you think about that number.
Yeah, I mean, it's when you see that number, it's pretty depressing, I guess, to think that so many people are in jobs that they're not engaged in. But I think it also presents an opportunity for us as leaders, HR leaders, when we look at something like coaching and how can coaching play a part in trying to reduce those numbers.
Absolutely. And that's where we're going to focus today is like how coaching is a proven methodology and approach and really helping people navigate through some of these challenges. So we're going to go ahead and hear from Glenn because he's really our guest speaker today. And so, Glenn, I'm wondering if you would be willing to share, and maybe if we rewind a little bit, and you could share like what inspired you to become a coach,
Sure.
and please share around that.
Okay. So one of my top 5 strengths in Strengths Finders is learner, and once I completed that assessment, I thought, wow, it all makes sense. There's this kind of craving need for me to learn new things, and being in the people industry in human resources, there was always this desire to help people be their best. And so back in 2012, I was chatting with a friend of mine and said, I'm ready to jump into something big, like maybe a master's program or an MBA or something like that. And he started telling me about a program that he was in. He was a senior VP of HR here in Vancouver. And he said, I started taking this coaching program. I'm only, 2 workshops in, but already it's transformed how I view HR. And he said, I wish I would have taken this program, 20 years ago when I started my career. So that was totally powerful for me. And I thought, well, I'm going to investigate this. And so I looked into the program and decided I was going to jump in as well. So for me, one of the first things that I did was to get the senior leadership in my company on board because I wanted them to pay for the coaching and the certification. So that the interesting tie-in to your slide, Aaron, is the engagement. So 2 big things for us in a small company were, keeping the engagement high so that people were engaged, and also to reduce turnover. So I came into the coaching with a real focus on trying to affect both of those numbers, and really wanted, kind of ties to my life purpose, just to help have another tool in my HR toolkit where I could help people. And so I really had no idea at that time what it was going to look like, but that's kind of the reason I got into it.
Great. And can you talk a bit more like around how it really helped? So how coaching really helped you as a HR leader, and what shifted or changed after you went through the program?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, like many of us on the call, for me, my definition of success in an interaction with an employee would be they would come into my office with a problem or a concern, and they would leave the office with a solution, and or at least ideas on how to fix it. And the old Glenn would take total responsibility for fixing that for that person. So and it was the same for leaders. And so with coaching, it gave me another perspective on it, and that not everything, I don't need to give people the answers to everything. And there's a big chunk of it that we can help people work through and think through things on their own. So that was the biggest transformation for me as a leader. I think some of the skills and some of the learnings from coaching also had a huge impact. It increased my listening skills, my ability to help people kind of work through different perspectives. So right away when I started coaching, once the training started, I had probably 17 people in the company that I was coaching, and funny story with that, I basically was strategic in who I selected and went up to people and said, listen, I'm taking this program. I need 100 hours to get certified. Would you be a client? And most people said yes. And so it just gave me an opportunity to kind of jump in and start using some of these skills. And I could see the impact that it was having right away on employees, on leaders, on relationships and impacts on teams as well.
Yeah, it's like and going back to what you said, it's like when, one of the ways that we're defining coaching here for those that aren't so familiar with coaching is, coaching is like a partnership between two people where you're collaborating to help that other person come up and find their own answers. So it's your job as a coach is to help others really elicit their resourcefulness and tap into their creative energy so they can solve their own solutions. So when you talked about how when you became a coach, it helped kind of lighten that burden, right, of you always having to give the answers. I just want to highlight that because it's so key around, it can be like a really transformational moment for people to say, oh, I don't actually have to have all the answers. I can really help others find their own, or help them help themselves find their own solutions.
I totally agree, and I think in my experience, people that come up with their own answers, I mean, they're implemented. I mean,
Yeah.
me giving somebody an answer, the chances of them actually doing something with it are 20-30%. But if they're excited about it, they've come up with something, they thought it through, they're going to do it. And in my experience, they do.
Yep. So let's you mentioned about your own experience as a coach. Let's talk about then. I know I had mentioned earlier to everybody that your organization won the ICF Prism Award for transforming your organizational culture. I'm really curious about, so when you trained as a coach, you started shifting your own ways of operating as a leader. How did that trickle in the organization? What happened in your organization to create such a shift in the culture?
Hmm. Well, a couple things. So, I mean, we were a smaller company. We had, I think, 250 employees at the time. And so just, starting with a small group, so 17 people that I was coaching. And the interesting part of I mean, we call it impact, was people that I was coaching started showing up in different ways. And they would be sharing their learnings with others in the organization, and it spread and it started to take hold. The interest in coaching increased significantly. I mean, I would have people coming into my office and saying, "Hi, Glenn. I heard from Sally that you're coaching her. I'm wondering if you would mind coaching me." And the need for it grew significantly, such that I needed to add a second internal coach sort of 2 years into this journey, and brought somebody in from the engineering side of the business into HR, and he jumped on as a coach. So I think the the transformation that was taking place, that were people were really looking at the ways that they interacted with themselves, the ways that they interacted with others, the language that they started using. Like in meetings, we talk about listening in our coaching sessions, and you would have people in meetings saying, "Okay, what level listening are we all at right now?" And I mean, the language was so known that people would all start laughing. We had one of the things we do in coaching when you start a coaching relationship is design the alliance that you're going to have with the other person. And a few of the leaders that I had been coaching used that approach with their team meeting. And she said, had a team meeting one day, and she goes, "I want to design with you how we want to work together." And they'd already worked together for 3 or 4 years. So these practical skills that people were learning that were helping them, they were also using in the workplace to help just increase the level of cooperation within the organization.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the level of cooperation. It even sounds like collaboration. So let's talk about what it means to shift from a reactive stance to a creative one. In leadership and performance coaching, we look at adult development theories around how we develop. And so the research shows now from the studies that they've done, and this is based upon some of Keegan's work, is that 70% of leaders at work show up in a reactive state. So the way that we're defining reactive is they are less effective. They're operating from a place of self-limiting beliefs, assumptions. They're not able to achieve, good relationships and also achieve results at the same time. So this duality of relationship and results. And then the research shows that 20% of leaders operate from a state of creative, where they are more self-aware, where they're more responsible for their impact. They're able to bring people along. They're able to also get results in a way that is most effective. So I'm curious, like for you, as we translate this to your organization and to what happened at your organization, what did you see in the shift, or what did you learn about the shift from reactive to creative? Like, what was that journey like for you all?
Hmm. And so that I love that question. I think just before, I would just say that one of the things that we did is to weave coaching and coach-like conversations into all areas of HR. So performance management, development, leadership development, onboarding, offboarding, almost anything that you can think of, you can use the coach approach, and also coaching. So, which leads into the answer to this, where we weaved coaching into our leadership development program, and we were using a 360 tool, and basically had that same concept that you're talking about, where it's a circle. The bottom of the circle is the reactive, and the top of the circle is the creative. And the creative is where we want to be as leaders, and building relationships and getting things done. So being strategic, courageous authenticity, and making connections. And so what was interesting is that when individuals received their feedback of where they stood in the circle, and we weaved coaching into it. So we did a debrief with them, and then we would get into the coaching and saying, what's keeping you in that controlling state down in the bottom of the circle? And so through a series of coaching sessions, they would uncover a self-limiting belief that said, you know what, I knew from the time I was 12, if I wasn't louder or smarter than everybody else, I was not going to be important, and I wouldn't be effective. And so we all have these things that we kind of carry around. And once you find that thing, then it's a matter of recognizing, what is it going to take for me now to be at the top of the circle, to be more authentic, to be more connecting with the relationships and listening, and being creative, and also making decisions and getting things done. So that process of getting people to understand, moving from the reactive to the creative, if coaching was the pizza dough, this leadership development and this the work that Keegan's doing and the model that we used was the sauce, and together it just had this powerful combination that spread like wildfire through the company.
Yeah, and it's like this idea of like looking underneath, right? It's like looking, what are the things that are really driving people's behavior or driving them to perform in a certain way? And it's like, without looking underneath, I'm curious to hear your perspective on this. Actually, it's like, without looking underneath, what would be the impact? If you just focused on the behaviors and you didn't look underneath at the beliefs or assumptions that were driving the behaviors.
Yeah, honestly, we had all of our senior managers, managers, and supervisors go through this process over 2.5 years, and everyone had this aha moment. Some people, it was emotional. They were just carrying us around and maybe didn't realize that they were, and the impact that it was having. So going down, you have to get at that root cause. And being scientists and engineers are always looking for the failure mode. So, you can use different language to help people figure this out, but they get it. And the driver is everybody wants to be their best self. And one little example I would give, and it's so hard in a short period of time to tell all the great stories, but on our senior leadership team, the coaching language and then this leadership development language was commonplace. And so I remember being in a meeting. It was pretty tense, and those meetings where somebody says something and the whole room gets quiet.
Yep.
And then one of the other leaders says, "Okay, everybody, where on the circle are we right now?" And everybody stopped, and there's smiles, and it was like, yeah, Some of us were in sort of the complying, some of us were in protecting, and a couple were in the controlling. And so then we had a little conversation about that and said, what do we need to do to get up there? And that shifted the space in the meeting. And that's the power of this stuff. Like, it's a power on an individual level, but when you can kind of disperse that into an entire team, it is golden.
Yep. Yeah. So I'm curious, it leaves me thinking, like, how did you, from an HR perspective, yeah, because you were head of HR, how did you make this work? Like, how did you make this happen? And I'm curious, like, what advice would you have to the HR professionals on the line, like around creating something like this?
Yes, so I would say start slow. Really make sure that you're not jumping in. This stuff takes time, and getting buy-in from senior leadership is also key in learning. Being strategic, I think when I look back, I would look for fans, and so I knew the CEO will be open to this, and maybe do a little coaching with them, kind of get them exposed to it, or maybe pilot this leadership model with them, and start to get those influencers in the company to be exposed to this. I think everybody's about measuring, so anything you can measure, start keeping track of things. Our approach within AFCC was to do pilots. So like a true research and development facility, we would do a pilot, we would look at it, and we would tweak it, and then we would modify it. And that was an approach that we took. But I think it's having sort of the patience that this stuff is going to take some time, and you will start to see some results right away. But a significant, like a culture change in an organization, that would take some time. But HR leaders are in the best position to to bring something like this in, because the companies are craving it. They may not know what coaching is, or they may not know like the benefits of it. But for HR to have this skill set and these tools, the possibilities are endless. And most people here have relationships with the leaders anyways, so it's not like we're starting from scratch. And based on
I can help you search the web for what's
your past successes, you're going to be able to bring something amazing into the company.
That's great. So what would be the I think you mentioned this, but like, what would be the mindset that you would encourage them, our HR professionals, to take on while being curious about coaching? Is that there's things that we hear, like, I can't influence that much because I'm in HR. HR is more of a compliance function. What would be the mindset that you would encourage people to be in around coaching?
I mean, it's kind of the question. What I would get each of us to think about is, what's the story that you want to tell in 5 years? So when you look back on this time, when you're thinking about bringing coaching in, what's the story you're going to want to tell that you did, that that happened to the organization? And I think that would bring up a lot of different thoughts and ideas for people. For me, in particular, it's courage, because it wasn't always straightforward. It's not like I just walked in and said, "Hey, I want to do this," and everyone's like, "Yay." Some people didn't know what it was. I mean, some people thought, "Okay, this is like, I mean, we're a business here and we're trying to get this stuff done, and you're taking up all this time." And so it's having the courage to push something, to lead something, but also being strategic, and I guess it's having that influencer, but it's also tying it to something that the company's trying to do, which we do in HR anyway. So tie it to an issue in the company, or tie it to one of your values, or tie it to like in the last 3 years that I was at the company, we had a corporate goal on coaching that varied every year that was presented and reviewed and approved by the board of directors. So it had gotten from just this small little program. Now it was part of our corporate measures. So sticking with it, having the courage to do it, and just learn. Like nothing, it's not going to be perfect, but you're going to learn along the way, and you're just going to going to have those opportunities to practice and just become a more powerful coach and leader.
That's great. I think that's really powerful to leave everyone with. And also, just quickly at one last point here, you had mentioned ROI of coaching. There was also an ICF case study that was done on your organization around the ROI. We will share that with everybody after the webinar. So if you've signed up for the webinar, we'd be happy to share that with you. Glenn, is there anything that you would want the folks on the line to know about the ROI?
Yeah, and I think, I mean, we weren't a profit center, so a lot of companies will use, sales increase or some fiscal measure to drive the ROI, and so we tried to be creative in ours, and I think you have to do the same thing. So the ones that we looked at, and it'll be in the case study, were turnover. So we had a 48% reduction in turnover over a 4-year period. For HR people, and this is interesting, we had a 50% reduction in employee relations issues. So by the time an issue got to me, the manager was so stressed out that they were wanting to fire this person. That's what I would call an employee relations issue. And with coaching, it was almost like that preventative dentistry where you're getting your teeth cleaned and fixed, that these issues weren't bubbling up. Whatever it is that you're going to measure, make it meaningful for your organization. And we used a culture survey that we did in 2014, and then we ran the same survey in 2017. So you could also do something like that where you're sort of measuring the change. Like anything, I mean, it's always difficult to say, is it coaching that's doing this? Is it leadership that's doing this? And you'll always have those questions because, cause and effect is not 100%. But I would say measure. I mean, the numbers are important, and get the numbers that will mean something. And ask your leaders, like what are some of the measures that they would want to see, and just start reporting on them.
Thanks, Glenn. That's really helpful. Thanks so much for sharing your story here. It's really inspiring to hear like how you started, and then what the application piece looked like, and then the results piece. And so if you have questions for Glenn and you're curious about anything specific, please write them in the question box. We're going to keep going with the rest of the presentation. And again, at the end, we'll take your questions. So Glenn, thank you, and please continue to layer in here as we go on go through the presentation to see if there's anything else that comes up for you.
Okay, will do.
Great. So Glenn really spent time talking about the impact of coaching from specifically from his organization, and how he was able to apply the coaching skills he learned when he trained as a coach, and then helping people become more coach-like in the organization, which ultimately led to a cultural change. Here's some other impacts of coaching. So one of the things we know is it really helps increase individuals' awareness levels, right? So we're looking at how do we help people become more aware when they're in a reactive state and shift to a creative one, right? Where they can be really, they can have optimal performance and be most effective. We also know that it helps people broaden their perspective, particularly for leaders or people you're working with as HR professionals, that see things so black and white. It really can help broaden people's perspective. It also can help people stretch their management and leadership range. So coaching is just one tool out of many that we use. Yeah. It can also influence the culture, and this is really key because we're looking at, as we mentioned before, we're looking at all the things that happen below, if you know the iceberg model, all the things that happen below the iceberg, like emotions, values, beliefs, everything that drives behavior. Yeah, and so that's what we're really curious about is transformation, is like how by becoming more aware of our beliefs, our values, and our emotions, how does that drive behavior? Yeah, so really curious about that. So these are just some ideas of how coaching can have an impact on you or your organization. And if you have more questions around this, we'd be happy to share some more examples. Let's talk a little bit about the program. So as I mentioned before, our company ACT Leadership is in collaboration with Brown University, offering our leadership and performance coaching program. So it's a 6-month certification program. It is an approved program by the ICF. So ICF is the International Coaching Federation. They're one of the governing bodies of coaching. And it takes place there's 3 modules that take place at the Brown University campus. And then the rest of the component is a virtual component. So this program is really targeted at people like yourselves, people who are professionals, leaders, they are in HR, they're managers that are wanting to develop. They're wanting to develop themselves and stretch their range as a leader, and also wanting to have a tool that they can really help other people find their own solutions. Going back to what Glenn said, there's so much that we take on that we're responsible for fixing issues, finding the answer, giving advice. And what coaching does is it really helps you look at how can I really just partner with someone to help them come up with their own solution. So it really takes that burden off, and it becomes more of a responsibility for that person to own. Okay, so this is the program schedule. So as I mentioned before, there's 3 modules. The first module is called Coaching Foundation. So it's very foundational. It's a 3-day module where we give you the introductions to coaching. So we're introducing you to basic things like learning how to listen differently, learning how to ask questions. So our default response as humans is to really, again, give advice or feel like we have to give the answer. And so we default into that mode really easily. So in module 1, we're really working on your default response to look at, maybe I can respond in a different way. How can I respond where I can really help the other person in the most effective way? So we're working on your default response. We're also introducing you to basic concepts around adult development theories around shifting from reactive to creative and looking at the duality of relationship and results, particularly as it relates to people and organizations. And module 2 is called Reactive to Creative, and that's really, it's a very content-heavy module where we're looking at how do you help others shift from a reactive state into a more creative one. So we're looking at everything below the iceberg, like self-limiting beliefs, values. We're looking at everything that drives us, that helps drive behavior, so we can help people become more aware of those. And then module 3, we're working with, like, how do you help people work through some more of the emotionally charged issues? So when there's resistance in the workplace, when there's frustration, when there's different emotions that show up, how do you work with people to work through those? I know in HR, you're constantly helping people. You're going through hiring processes, you're going through transition processes, and coaching can really help you support individuals in working through the emotions that they're feeling around these different contexts. Okay, and then in module 3, we bring everything together. So there's 3 in-person modules. There's also there's mentor coaching calls that you will be in with different groups throughout the program. There's practice time. And there's also individual mentor feedback sessions where we get to give you feedback on your coaching. Okay, so that's a little bit about the program. Our spring program kicks off in March, and we're taking applications for that. So the dates are March 19th through the 21st. Module 2 is April 16th through the 18th, and then Module 3 is May 28th through the 30th. So if you are interested in applying or learning more about the program, please let us know and write in the comment box or question box so we can take down your information. We'll contact you so we can give you more information about the program. We also have limited scholarship funding for HR professionals. We're really investing with Brown University in this area because we think HR is such a critical component of organizations. And so we have some limited scholarship funding. So if that is something that you're interested, please do let us know in the comment box if you're interested in scholarship funding. Okay, this is a little bit more about us and our faculty and then some of the clients that we've worked with. And we're going to just pause now and take questions. So some of the questions are coming through now. And so you feel free to write questions either related to specifically to Glenn around his experience of being a coach and his work in his organization, or if you have any questions about the program or how it relates to HR, please go ahead and type those in now. Okay, and I'm just going to start filtering questions through. Okay, so someone has a question. So what is important about going through an ICF program? Okay, so a little bit about ICF. ICF is one of the governing bodies of global governing bodies of coaching, and our program is ICF approved. So what that means is after you go through our program and you want a formal accreditation with ICF, you can work towards that formal accreditation if you choose, and then you become accredited with the International Coaching Federation as well. Glenn, do you want to say anything about the ICF?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very powerful resource and body. You know, they have their code of ethics and competencies that they want all coaches to adhere to. So it's kind of like I don't know, some kind of quality, like ISO 9000 certification. Like they make sure a standard's met, and they offer a lot of different. They offer a lot of different training and learning opportunities as well.
Great. Thank you. Okay, next question. How is coaching different? Sorry, I'm just trying to read this. Okay, how is coaching different than mentoring, and how will that help HR professionals? Glenn, do you want to answer that?
Sure. So here's my take. I think, to me, in a simple way, mentoring is more about if I'm the mentor and I have a mentee, somebody that I'm mentoring, it's more about there's more about me sharing my story, my successes. They might be talking about, hey, I'm trying to get promoted to this level. How did you do that? So then I would tell my story. They'd be like, hey, I'm having an issue with this person. So they bring real issues into the workplace. I think in a mentoring conversation, it's more direction coming from you as the mentor. Whereas coaching is about really, people are naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. So you use that model to say that if I'm coaching Erin and she's talking about an issue, I'm going to ask powerful questions and try to get her to kind of unlock what is it that's holding her back from dealing with that. And so really utilizing my skills to help her think through it. And they're both powerful tools, and I would say that I've used both. I tend to, if I'm going to do coaching, I'll have a coach session, so we'll only do coaching. I also use my coach skills throughout the day, so coach-like conversations. And then if I'm going to have a mentoring relationship set up, I can set that up. But I really make sure it's clear to the person what the differences are.
That's great. And what you said about, helping people expand their thinking, essentially that's what coaching is doing, is you're taking the time to really help somebody think critically for themselves so they can ultimately come up with their own decision and own it. And, only if we could do that all the time throughout the day, right? We know that we don't have time to have coaching conversations in every conversation. But it's really looking at what are the conversations that, in the workplace where it would be really applicable to have a coach-like conversation or a formal coaching session, really to help somebody think more critically and deeply about what it is that they, that where they need to work towards a solution, right? Because our tendency is to really give advice and to offer something really quick, right? Because we're looking for quick fixes, and it might not be helpful to another person. So, a lot of times we're really looking at like, when is it really appropriate to have a coaching conversation, and or a coach-like conversation at work.
The other thing too, I just add to that, I agree with everything you said. You're dealing with a lot of smart people. So if it was as simple as me telling them, oh, just do this, this, and this, I mean, they would have figured that out long ago. They didn't need me. Yeah. And so with the coaching piece, it's really challenging them and having them. And we talked about getting under the surface. It's challenging them to get under the surface on whatever the topic is.
Yeah, that's great. Next question, what makes your program different than other programs? What I would say about that is our program is contextualized around leadership and performance. So, we're looking through the lens of how do we help people grow, how do we help people grow and develop as leaders, as managers, as individuals within the workplace. We're looking through the lens of what are the things that are getting in the way of that person really performing and really being at their best, right, where they can be most effective. So we're looking through that lens. It's less of a life coaching program and more around, focused to the lens of leadership and performance in the organizational setting. So the people that are attending our courses, we are asking for a minimum of 5 years of work experience. We're, most of the people that are attending are professionals or they're consultants who are wanting to use these skills working with leaders or working with professionals within the workplace. Last question, is there scholarship funding available for the spring program? Yes, we have. We do have some limited funding available for the spring program starting in March. So again, if you're interested in that, please let us know and our program manager will reach back out to you. So you can write that in the comment box, or you can also, if you want more information, you can click on the button here, apply now, where the application, it will take you to the application to apply for the program. Okay, looks like we're close to time. I just wanted to thank everybody for attending today. We're really appreciative of your time. We hope you got some value out of this webinar today. Glenn, thank you so much for sharing your story and also giving us the inspiration to know that we can actually we can do something like this out there. So thank you so much for joining us today. And Glenn, I just wanted to know if you have any final comments or final thoughts on your end.
The thing that, as you were talking earlier, one thing that came up for me was that this work that we're doing, or this work that you all be doing with coaching, affects people's lives, and it's not just lives at work. And there's an example, without getting too detailed, where one of our senior leaders, who was in the bottom of the circle at work, trying to get up to the top of the circle, realized that by the time he got home after a long day, he was at the bottom of the circle with his kids. And he made that shift, and I tell you, it was just amazing. Like he had this thing where he'd leave all his work stuff in the garage when he parked the car, and then he would walk in and totally be at the top of the circle. So this stuff is not just important at work. This transforms people's lives in their entire life.
Absolutely. I think that's so critical. It really does transform lives, and you can have a coach-like conversation with anybody, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, thank you everyone for joining. And if you have any more questions, feel free to reach out to us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Glenn.